you. That was very nice. Excellent. You know, I know that when she said, who's here from Portugal, people wanted to go, woo! So, anybody here from Portugal? See? You really wanted to do that from the very beginning, but you didn't get an opportunity to do that. Well, thank you, Christy. I appreciate that. Let's see. That actually works. I may have to do that the whole presentation. Excellent. Well, my name is JC Quintana, and Christy's correct. You know, most of my life, I think I've been focused on relationships because of the size of my family. I have 5 kids, 2 grandkids. The most typical reaction when I tell people I have 5 kids is usually, are you okay? That usually is the most typical reaction that I get. But most of my life I've actually spent on enhancing the way that we perceive relationships, and to expand on what Christy said, not only customer relationships, but we're finding that a lot of the patterns of growth and deterioration that apply to how we build relationships, not only in interpersonal life, actually applies across what we do with customers, what we do with employees, and also what we do with our partners. So VARs, resellers, the relationship that you have with Microsoft, the relationship that you have with your partner is very applicable to that. And I have to tell you a little bit of the story, especially the story that led to the first book. The first book's available now. The next book's available in June. You'll be launching in Vegas in June of this year. And there's been a real evolution between the time that I wrote the first book and the second book. Those of you who are here from Microsoft will appreciate that. I spent a lot of time in the Microsoft Partner Channel, and was just heartfelt love for my customers and what they were doing with technology, because I love technology myself. I was a user myself. And for the very first part of my time as a partner and working with technology, I really spent a lot of time with lawyers. And so our primary customer were attorneys and lawyers, and my perception of what I thought was relationship was very, very skewed. I thought, I'm gonna move over here. I thought, well, the use of technology is really, really geared towards getting people to make more money. And it's really geared towards enhancing the way people, fill their pockets. And so in my time working with attorneys, my perspective was a little skewed. And then I ended up working south of the United States in the state of Florida, and my primary customer was the children of the state of Florida, in an organization that was really dedicated primarily to enhance education for the children of the state, improve their lives, reduce fraud, so that the kids actually have more funding, spend more time with caregivers, have better programs before school, actually have a place to go after school, and truly enhance their lives and give them an opportunity to get an education and to actually grow in a safe environment. And that system itself was eventually connected to the broader environment in the state of Florida. So kids actually get money for college and grants, and they got art programs that were instituted based on that. And then my perspective started to change, and I really had to ask myself, this thing that I'm doing, this technology that I'm using, these tools that are serving a purpose, perhaps are not just there to enhance financial futures, but actually enhance the lives of people. I remember, I've lost track of the number of times that I walked into a technology project or an implementation project of Dynamics CRM or another product, and would walk out the door after speaking words like loyalty and engagement and relationship, and was challenged by many of my own customers about my level of understanding of what a relationship even was. And I started going back to the pattern of deterioration and growth that happens in companies when we don't think in that way. So I want to tell you a story about a fictitious company, and we'll call it La Quintana, for lack of a better name. It may sound familiar to you, but that's a complete coincidence. There really is no other hotel called anything like that. It's completely fictitious. La Quintana did a really good job when he first started his business. In fact, it started really focusing on all the right things and having a real strong business mindset. In fact, they had a real business model generation mindset. And so La Quintana started by focusing on the right customer segments. as the La Quintana board of directors got together with the people that were going to run the business, and we're going to go out, buy the technology, and set the right tools to be able to take care of their customers, that was their primary priority. They decided that they were going to focus on the right customers. They were going to select a very specific customer segment so that they would not be wasting their time too much with the wrong kind of customers and give all their attention to the right customer segment. Then they decided to, of course, focus on value. They decided that in order for them to get customers to come back, they needed to focus on providing the right value to the right customer segments and the right channels to be able to deliver it. Because they knew that if they picked the right customers, they could focus on them. And if they picked the right value and deliver it through the right channels, then again, people will also be able to tell other customers about what was going on and their own experiences getting the right value through the right company. Now, in order to be able to do that, of course, they had to kind of focus on what were the right relationships and what those customers expected in terms of relationship, specifically based on relevance, based on what was important to them, based on who they were as individuals. And to accomplish it, they had to, of course, have the right resources, they had to have the right partners, they had to have the right activities in order to make money and in order to manage costs. And that, by the way, is the business model generation canvas. And those of you who are here who know the canvas are probably looking through that and saying, that looks very familiar. That's because that's the Osterweiler business model generation canvas, which is used quite a lot today. And I actually happen to be a big fan of it. So if you're not familiar with it, I would recommend that you become familiar with it. So as long as La Quintana was doing that, business was good and life was good. They were focusing on the right people. They were making the right investments. As soon as the business grew and they brought in revenue because they were delivering value and building relationship, they were able to generate more revenue to go out and get the right resources, to deliver the right activities, and forge the right partnerships. But then something happened at La Quintana. People started thinking about the amazing growth of the company, and instead of thinking about what the customer needed, they started thinking about what La Quintana needed. And they started thinking about what was required in every one of the departments, started really inventorying what could be of benefit to the individual departments and divisions of the company, and started developing a very, very mine mentality. My department, we're going to grow my business, we're going to grow my silo. And yes, indeed, La Quintana became a very, very, very siloed organization, because they were looking inwards. And in fact, anytime that the budget came around at the end of the year, it was like Lego blocks. And they would take these Lego blocks, and instead of thinking about building something magnificent for the customer, they started thinking about how to take each of those Legos to build their own little race cars and actually, race this individual race for individual success within the organization, and started thinking more and more about what was important to La Quintana and only to La Quintana. Of course, you can't do that with that technology, so many of them ended up going to a conference called eXtreme CRM, and then eventually eXtreme365, and they started hearing about this technology. And over the years, as they went out to call center software technology conferences and different types of technology conferences, they were introduced to this very scary concept called the nexus of forces. Is there an echo effect? Can we do that? The nexus of forces. Okay, that's good. Okay? And it was a very, very scary concept, because technologists were telling their customers and people like Quintana that if they did not go out and address the need for mobility, analytics, social, and cloud, that their businesses would fall apart. So all the focus went from the internal focus to even more internal focus about what kind of technology they needed in order to become faster and more efficient and better at what they did in order to grow their mine business. Okay? And they developed something that, for those of you who are here from the United States, you may recognize it. They developed something that I call the P. Diddy effect. And those of you who know who P. Diddy is, actually those of you who don't know who P. Diddy is a very famous person, and I say person in the United States because he has been many different things. He used to be a rapper, then he became a clothing executive, then he became an actor, then he became a singer, and now he's doing all different things. And what's really particular about P. Diddy is that every single time that he changed career or every time that he changed initiative, he also changed his name. He used to be Diddy, then he was P. Diddy, and he was P. Diddy Combs, then he was Sean Combs. And it is so much like the technical initiatives and strategic initiatives that we have today. We used to call this big thing for relationship management at companies, we used to call it CRM. And then we decided that we needed to change the name because the expense and trouble that we got into making the wrong investments in CRM, and many companies got really scared about not implementing it the way they wanted it. So they got really scared and they changed the focus. So what do you do when something goes wrong? You call it something else, right? So that you don't get fired. So they started calling it CEM. Right? And so now customer engagement going along, and then the call center environment kind of took that name and people got confused. So what do you do then? You change the name again, right? And we call it things like customer satisfaction and customer centricity and CS and CEM. And now, as of late, we're calling it what? That's right, we're calling it customer experience or customer engagement. And so again, La Quintana really fell prey to that. And what happened? Here it is, an organization that started really, really well, focused on the customer, focused on relationships, focused on value, and over time started going inward, developing silos, focusing too much on technology. And as a segmented organization, they ended up having to find some measurement that was collectively acceptable for them to at least figure out whether or not their customers were going to recommend them or not. So that's what La Quintana did. They decided to adopt the Net Promoter Score, which is a measurement that asks customers, how likely are you to recommend me to others? Unfortunately, by the time they figured that out, it was a little too late, right? Why? Why did this happen at La Quintana? Why did this happen at so many different companies? Perhaps even your company is going through this evolution or de-evolution where it is an inward mentality, and maybe you're here today trying to figure out how to leverage strategy and technology and some of the tactics from your peers that are here today to maybe get out of that siloed environment and work together in a more productive environment that is focused on the customer. What happens? Well, I always tell people that Net Promoter Score and some of the things that we do to grow business are great, but if you don't focus on relationships, you're going to find that deterioration actually increase far beyond what you're able to manage it. Why? Well, I've been married to my lovely wife, Shelly, for about 25 years. And if you think about the family environment, the interpersonal relationships are very similar to business relationships. And when I met my lovely wife, Shelly, and I was sitting across the table on our first date, I was thinking about very specific things. I was thinking about things like, hey, what do you need to make this an amazing date? What kind of things do you need for us to go from where we are today to building a fantastic relationship? Well, I was asking questions like, how can I make things easy for you? Can I get you some tea? Can I get you some more Chinese food? Can I smile brighter? Right? And I was also thinking about how do we build emotional connection so that this date actually leads to a very successful, extensive, productive relationship, okay? If my date had not gone well with Shelly that way, and I had asked her, well, too bad, huh? Can you do me a favor? Can you rate me from 1 to 10 how likely you are to recommend me to others? It would have been a completely different thing, right? Because we moved from a relational thinking to a very transactional thinking. And sadly, that is really what companies go through. And so if we go back to the business model generation canvas and we start thinking about what happened with La Quintana, they started really well. They started thinking about the right things. And by the way, I'm not saying that you can't think about cost and you can't or shouldn't think about revenue. What I'm saying is that in companies like La Quintana, that became their focus, right? Their focus became the end of the quarter. How do we close the quarter? How do I keep my job? How do I get a promotion? How do we make our own internal individual organization successful? Instead of thinking of bigger things, like what does the customer need to feel that they have a strong relationship that leads to loyalty? It's interesting that we use the word loyalty in the business environment when loyalty is something that we use very, very strongly in a very personal way in our interpersonal relationships. I want my kids to be loyal. I want them to think about me and think about what a great dad I am. I want my wife to say he's a loyal husband. The word loyal is a very personal word that we use in business without thinking about the implications of that. And that's really what happens a lot of times when we apply the business model generation correctly, is that we forget that very important component called customer relationships. And even worse than that, we forget that relationships have very specific patterns of relationship and growth that we have to manage very, very specifically. So what is the biggest problem in this thing that we call customer relationship management and customer relationship technology and strategy? And it's the fact that we've somewhat turned the name into a tool rather than thinking about the importance of actually managing relationships. And that really has become the problem, that in customer relationship management, we've stopped managing relationships in the way that relationships need to be managed. All right, so what is that? What does that look like? If you look at it from the interpersonal relationship perspective, which, by the way, I've spent about the last couple of years in research for this book that's coming out in June, building benchmark and doing some formal and informal studies about people's perspectives of relationships. And the number one question that we've asked people that have done the surveys is, do you think that relationships are forged the same way in personal life as they are forged in business life? 90% of the people that we ask say, absolutely. It's no different. The way that I value people and that I pursue relationship strength and growth in my personal relationships is the same way that I do it with my business relationships. And then we ask another set of questions. We say, do you think it is possible to have that level of strength in your relationships at work as you do in your relationships in personal life? And almost 90% of people say, oh, absolutely not. It's very different, things are done differently in the workplace, and the patterns are different. But psychology tells us that that is not true. In fact, if you think about the relationship patterns that start with the very first step, relationship patterns always start with a need for functionality, accessibility, and emotional connection. It just so happens, and this is by no accident, that in the way that we've known that interpersonal relationships grow, because people need to know that they're getting what they need, that it is easy to get what they need, and that it actually leads to enjoyment and emotional growth and emotional connection. We've recently found out through the book Outside In and other great resources that the customer experience index, which together with NPS gives us a really good metric for customer relationship success, happens to be solely based on functionality, accessibility, and emotional connection. And so we're really beginning to connect it. And we also know that in order for us to accomplish that, we have to have a series of activities that the business model generation canvas tells us, right? We have to have key activities to perform that. Those are over there on the top. But they have to lead progressively towards something. Okay? They begin here in the acquaintance stage, where people find mutual attraction. They find out whether there's a mutual interest. In the business relationship, that's value. You know, what can you give me? What can I get? And then it moves on through the next stage, which is build up, in which people realize that since they are going to get what they need from you, and that it is of value, and the relationship actually is of value, that build up begins to move towards consolidation. And people start making decisions that are solely based on whether or not there's a balance between costs, risk, and rewards. And if you think about this, again, in both personal and customer relationships, and also relations with your employees and peers, and even the people that you're going to be interacting with here today, you're going to find out that that is a cycle that we constantly go through. We're always asking that question. How much is it costing us? Great. I'll pay that. Why? Because even though the risk is high, so are the rewards. And when the risk is too high and the cost is too low, then we make decisions to, instead of going towards the consolidation step, we start moving more towards an imbalance in cost, rewards, and relationships end. And that's really, really the end of it, right? They end there. Some can be restored, some cannot be restored. So I want to do a little exercise with you really, really quick. Okay? I want you to stop for a second, and I want you to think about all the words that have been associated with any customer initiative that you've ever had in your career. Okay? So these are the things that we put the word customer in front of. These are the things that we get rated on. This is the kind of technology that we buy. So I'm going to take a second. I'm going to let you think. And just think in terms of, okay, well, you know, I have a project right now is our customer blank project. Or we just bought some really great technology from Microsoft, and it was customer blank technology. Or I went out and read a really great book about customers, and it was about customer blank. And I'm not going to do this alone. I'm going to actually ask for some help from you. So let's hear from the audience. Let's see, what kinds of things did you think about? What were some words that came up right away? Say it really, really loud, almost like the band is playing. All right. That's right. All right, come on, you can participate.
Insights.
Insights? Okay, what else? Were you yelling at me, ma'am? What was that? All right, what was that? Focus? What else? Okay. What else? Yeah. All right, what else? Value. You cheated. Okay. Centricity. Okay, what else?
Satisfaction.
All right, satisfaction. That's great. Good. You're getting this. Keep going. That's good. Keep going. What else?
Survey.
All right, purpose. Great. All right. It's funny that I'm not hearing some of the words that are actually associated with some like technology projects, like customer relationship, customer engagement. Somebody said centricity. How about the most common one? How about customer service? Anybody have any customer service? You know, yeah, absolutely, right? How about customer support? Okay, great. Now, I did that in purpose. I did that to illustrate that, you know, and so someone asked me, by the way, they said, you know, why do you use these very specific words? And my answer is that, you know, in the last 2 years of study and benchmark, we actually went through over 1,500 words that are somehow associated with how we build relationships at work. And these words were the ones that came to the top. After we sifted through them, we went through initiatives. It's also no surprise that the most common technology initiatives have these words associated with it. And if I were to group all the technologies available today to build customer relationships, I could easily go through them and tell you at least 10 or 20 that have the name customer relationship, customer engagement, customer centricity, customer service, or customer transparency, or customer experience associated with them. Let me go through each of these, and then we'll conclude for today. You know what? I want to invite you to a workshop that we're doing. We're going to actually do, not this next hour, but
As soon as the breakouts start.
yes. So after not this keynote, but after the keynote that follows, we're going to do a workshop, actually spend an hour on each of these. But what I want you to do is if you have a piece of paper, I want you to go through each of these. And the question that I want to ask you today is, and I want you to just forget about technology for a minute. I just want you to think specifically about the way that you're building relationships with people. The way that you build new relationships with employees, with customers, with your extended partner channels and distributors. I want you to ask of yourself whether or not you're considering the following as you build relationships. Number one, are you considering value? Are you considering whether there's mutual value, extended value in what you're doing? Are you thinking about your business relationships in the same way that you're looking at your interpersonal relationships? In other words, that you're setting the right expectations to make sure that as the relationship grows, that both parties are getting the value that they expected in order to do that they're getting the benefits. That you, again, whether it be through technology or through methodology, that you are constantly asking the cost, risk, reward question. At the individual level, as you're talking to people, as you're setting activities, appointments, as you're making calls, as you're setting up presentations, as you're selling your products and services, are you thinking about the value that you're delivering to people and how it is that you're managing risk, presenting cost, and showing the rewards of that service to your customers? Number two, are you considering what engagement even is? We have this bad habit of using the word engagement and putting it as a label. Experience, the same thing. We call everything customer engagement. We call everything customer experience. But what is really engagement? Okay? So I'm going to do a little exercise with you. I want you to take your hands. I want you to move them over. I'm not going to have you do jazz hands. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Don't be nervous. Just put your hands like this. And then I want you to bring them together, just like that, and interlock them, just as if you had gears. And I want you to go like this. Okay? That's what I want you to think about every time you think about engagement. Why? Because we think about engagement, but we don't realize that engagement, okay, the analogy of the engagement is the analogy of gears. Gears connect. Gears interlock. Gears require lack of friction in order for them to move. And that's what I want you to think in terms of building relationships. Relationships need engagement. Relationships need you to create a positive communication climate for those gears to be able to move and be able to connect. Because without true engagement, then all you really have is one-way communication. All you really have is information that you're giving your clients. You don't really truly have connection and the perception of value that allows your clients to be co-creator in the value creation process. You want customers to actually talk to you and return your calls and fill out your surveys? Then focus on engagement, because engagement is really what forges collaboration. Here's another word that we use all the time, is the word centricity, but we use it so poorly. We think in retail especially, we think about centricity and not realize that centricity is not just about putting the customer at the center, but thinking about the most important and relevant things related to the client. When I think about the psychology of centricity, for example, I'm not only thinking about their needs as a customer, I'm actually thinking about their individual needs, about what's of relevance to them, of what's important to their national culture. How is it that language influences it? What's the organizational culture of that individual, and how does that influence social structure and norms and the groups they participate in? Why? Because culture gives meaning to social structure, and without really thinking about the influence of who people are in the roles they take, in the groups they're part of, then we don't really have centricity. Most of the people that I talk to on a daily basis ask me how easy it is to put together a user group or a customer group or some kind of customer experience group so customers give them feedback. And I ask them every time, are you considering who they are as individuals, what they like, their culture? And a great majority of people say no. We hadn't thought about that. We probably have most of Europe represented here in some form or another, including the United States as well, probably represented here. And it's a really great picture of, again, what your focus should be when it comes to centricity. When it comes to service, the most important component in relationship building is that you understand that service has actually two different components. We do really, really well at the first component, which is the idea of keeping our promise. So we all have SLAs. We all know that if we deliver a product and service and something happens to it, that we have a responsibility to the client to actually fix it or make good. But the second part we often forget, which is that besides responsibility, having the knowledge, the responsiveness, and credibility to be able to do what you promise, it is also very important to focus on accountability. Why? Because relationships need responsibility as much as they also need a sense of empathy, a sense of sensitivity to the individual needs of people, and also an understanding of ownership. When I make a mistake, I want to own the problem because I really value this relationship and I really want that relationship to either continue or be restored. And then finally, one of the biggest misunderstandings of all, which is companies always go for nice little marketing slogans that say something like, "You can trust us," right? That's popular. Or they'll go inside to internal organizations and they'll go, "We want customers to build trust with us." But they completely skip the most important element of trust, which is transparency. You cannot have trust without transparency. Why? Because people need to have insight into the decisions you're making. And maybe 10 years ago, you could have gotten away with hiding things from customers, but technology no longer allows it. Okay? That together is what we call experience. And without great, strong experiences, we cannot have really, really strong relationships. If I've heard this mantra about customer experience over and over again and wonder what it really is, experience really is how we set the stage to give people functionality, accessibility, and emotional connection in the things that really matter and build relationship, which is value, which is engagement, which is centricity, service, support, and transparency. Okay? And those are the things that allow us to leverage technology, but we have to take that whole ecosystem of technology and always, you were taking pictures, all back up. Right. Just for you, my friend, right? Okay. See? But we have to take that entire ecosystem of technology, the things that we learn, those really amazing, valuable technology tools, and always frame them within that relationship skill set. And I promise you that as you go through the conference this week, and you go out and look at the vendors and talk, and listen to Microsoft, look at the things they're doing, the amazing program Chrissy's put together, you'll find out that it becomes easier to move away from the idea that technology has to be leveraged, and you move into the mentality into relationship has to be established through the leverage of technology. Think about that for a while, and I thank you for your time.